My name is Olivia Thornton, and at 32 years old, I discovered what true betrayal feels like. It wasn't from a cheating boyfriend or a backstabbing friend. It came from my own family. When my sister Madeline uttered those words at our family meeting, "No one wants you here," and my parents silently nodded in agreement, something inside me shattered forever. What they didn't know was how thoroughly I would rebuild myself and dismantle their perfect lives in the process. Before I dive into this story that changed everything, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you've ever experienced family betrayal, hit that like button. Let me know I'm not alone. If this is your first time on my channel, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about family drama, karma, and justice served. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. For 32 years, I believed I belonged to a loving family. The Thorntons were respected in our small Connecticut community. My father, Richard, a successful investment banker, my mother, Eleanor, a well-known interior designer with clients across New England, my sister, Madeline, 2 years younger than me and forever the golden child. We lived in a colonial-style house with a perfectly manicured lawn, hosted 4th of July barbecues, and took expensive vacations that looked flawless on social media. Growing up, there were signs I chose to ignore. The way my mother would beam with pride at Madeline's achievements while offering only tepid acknowledgement of mine. How my father would clear his schedule for Madeline's dance recitals, but consistently missed my academic competitions. The subtle ways family photos were arranged to showcase Madeline in the center, with me positioned slightly off to the side, as if I were an afterthought in our family portrait. "It's just your imagination," I'd tell myself whenever those thoughts surfaced. Families have different dynamics with different children. I compensated by working harder, achieving more, constantly seeking approval that seemed perpetually out of reach. I excelled academically, graduating at the top of my class from Columbia with a degree in finance, following in my father's footsteps. I secured a prestigious position at a competing firm to his, climbing the corporate ladder with determination. Every promotion, every accomplishment was shared at family dinners with hope in my heart that this time, this achievement would finally earn their genuine pride. Meanwhile, Madeline floated through life on charm and our parents' connections. She dropped out of college twice, started and abandoned 3 different career paths, and still received nothing but encouragement and financial support. "Madeline is finding herself," my mother would say, while my father nodded sagely. Not everyone's path is straightforward. The contrast to their expectations of me was stark but unspoken. Despite these differences, I maintained the illusion of familial closeness. Sunday dinners at my parents' house were mandatory. Holiday celebrations were elaborate affairs where we played our roles to perfection, the successful, united Thornton family. I brought thoughtful gifts, remembered birthdays, and was the one they called when they needed technical help or financial advice. I was useful, if not cherished. When I met David 3 years ago, I believed I had finally found someone who saw me, truly saw me, and valued what he saw. Handsome, kind, with a sharp intellect that challenged mine, he seemed perfect. Our relationship progressed quickly, and within a year, we were engaged. I was ecstatic when my family appeared to welcome him with open arms. "He's exactly what you need, Olivia," my mother had said, patting my hand condescendingly. "Someone stable to balance you out." I ignored the backhanded nature of the comment, focusing instead on what seemed like acceptance. David charmed them effortlessly, spending hours discussing investment strategies with my father, complimenting my mother's design choices, and laughing at Madeline's stories. I mistook their approval of him for approval of us, of me and my choices. The wedding planning began in earnest. My mother and Madeline took over, dismissing my preferences for a smaller, more intimate ceremony in favor of an extravagant affair at the country club. "The Thorntons have a reputation to maintain," my mother reminded me whenever I objected. I acquiesced, telling myself that their involvement was a sign of love, not control. 2 months before the wedding, David started acting strangely, coming home late, being vague about his whereabouts, taking calls in another room. I attributed it to pre-wedding jitters, work stress, anything but the obvious truth that was staring me in the face. Then came the family dinner 1 week before our engagement party. David arrived separately, claiming he had been held up at work. There was an unusual tension in the air as we gathered around my parents' dining table. Wine flowed freely and conversation seemed forced. I noticed the significant glances exchanged between my fiancé and my family members, but dismissed them as wedding-related secrets. "We need to talk about something important," my father announced as dessert was served. His tone was somber, businesslike, the voice he used for serious financial discussions or delivering bad news. "What's going on?" I asked, looking around at their faces, suddenly aware that I was the only one who didn't know what was coming. Little did I know, that dinner would be the beginning of the end, not just of my engagement, but of the elaborate fantasy I had constructed about my place in the Thornton family. The foundation of my identity was about to crumble beneath me, leaving me with nothing but the harsh truth and the beginnings of a plan that would eventually give me everything I never knew I deserved. "We've called this family meeting because we care about you, Olivia," my mother began, her voice dripping with a concern I would soon recognize as completely fabricated. She exchanged glances with my father, who nodded encouragingly. My sister Madeline sat unnaturally straight, her eyes gleaming with what I now recognize was barely contained anticipation. David, my fiancé of 14 months, stared down at his hands, unable to meet my gaze. "David has something he needs to tell you," my father continued, his tone suggesting he was facilitating an intervention rather than orchestrating my humiliation. David cleared his throat, finally looking up. "Olivia, I can't go through with the wedding," he said, his voice steady, rehearsed. The words hung in the air like poison gas. I felt my chest constrict, my vision narrowing to focus solely on his face, the face I had trusted, loved, planned a future with. "What? Why? What are you talking about?" My questions tumbled out, confusion overwhelming me. "There's someone else," he admitted, and the bottom dropped out of my world. But the true devastation wasn't his infidelity, it was what came next. "I've fallen in love with Madeline," he continued, reaching across the table to take my sister's hand. "It wasn't planned. We never meant to hurt you." I turned to Madeline, desperately hoping this was some cruel joke, but the triumphant look in her eyes confirmed the unthinkable truth. My sister, my own blood, had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. "How long?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. 6 months, Madeline answered without a hint of remorse. "We tried to fight it, Olivia, but you can't help who you fall in love with." 6 months. Half the time David and I had been engaged, he had been secretly seeing my sister. Memories flooded back, Madeline offering to take wedding planning meetings when I was busy with work, late-night strategy sessions with David for the surprise honeymoon, times when they were both unreachable for hours. What I had interpreted as thoughtfulness had been opportunities for betrayal. "And you knew?" I turned to my parents, a desperate hope that they were as blindsided as I was. My mother's lips thinned into a disapproving line. "We've known for a few weeks," she admitted. "We asked them to wait until after your big merger project was complete to tell you. We didn't want it affecting your work performance," my father added, as if this demonstrated some kind of consideration. The realization that my entire family had conspired behind my back, had discussed and planned this reveal like some kind of business strategy, made me physically ill. I felt the room spinning, my carefully constructed reality disintegrating around me. "This doesn't have to be dramatic, Olivia," my mother continued, her voice taking on the patronizing tone she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. "These things happen. Madeline and David have a real connection, the kind that doesn't come along every day. The kind I apparently don't deserve." I asked, bitterness seeping into my voice. My father sighed heavily. "Don't make this about you. David and Madeline are well suited. They complement each other in ways that you and David simply didn't. And what about the fact that he was engaged to me? That she's my sister? I demanded, anger beginning to replace the shock. Madeline rolled her eyes, and said, "This is exactly why we were hesitant to tell you. You always make everything so difficult, so emotional." Emotional? You stole my fiancé. No one stole anything, my father interjected sharply. David made a choice. A better choice for everyone involved, if we're being honest. The casual cruelty of his words struck me like a physical blow. Everyone involved except me, I pointed out, fighting back tears. Olivia, my mother said, reaching across to pat my hand condescendingly, let's be realistic. Your relationship with David was comfortable, predictable. What Madeline and David have is passionate, exciting. Surely you want them to be happy. At the expense of my happiness? I asked incredulously. That's when Madeline delivered the line that would change everything, the words that would echo in my mind for months and fuel what came next. No one wants you here, she said, her voice cold and clear. Not David, not me, not even Mom and Dad. You've always been the odd one out, the one who doesn't quite fit. We've all just been too polite to say it until now. I looked to my parents, waiting for them to contradict her, to defend me, to show even a hint of the parental love I had spent my life believing in despite all evidence to the contrary. Instead, they nodded in silent agreement. In that moment, 32 years of seeking approval, of making excuses for their behavior, of desperately trying to earn the love that should have been freely given, crystallized into perfect clarity. I wasn't unwanted because of any failing on my part. I was unwanted because they were incapable of seeing my worth. I stood up slowly, legs shaking but resolve building. I understand now, I said quietly. Thank you for finally being honest. I walked out of that dining room with my dignity intact, despite their attempts to strip it from me. In my car, alone with the truth for the first time, I didn't cry as expected. Instead, I felt something hardening within me, a determination that would become the foundation for everything that followed. They had shown me exactly who they were and what they thought of me. Now, I would show them exactly who I could become when freed from the constraints of seeking their approval. The week following the family meeting passed in a blur of practical arrangements. I called my closest friends, Rebecca and James, who immediately offered their guest room as a temporary sanctuary. I arranged for movers to collect my belongings from the apartment David and I had shared, scheduling the pickup for a time I knew he would be at work. I drafted emails to the wedding vendors, canceling our arrangements with terse explanations about unforeseen circumstances. Through it all, a strange calm guided my actions. The devastating pain I had initially expected never materialized, replaced instead by a clarifying anger that sharpened my focus rather than clouding it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't making decisions based on how my family would perceive them. I was acting solely for myself, and the freedom was intoxicating. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from them, faint concern wrapped in condescension. Olivia, don't be childish. We need to discuss the announcement to friends and extended family, my mother texted. The silent treatment is beneath you. Call me back so we can discuss your severance package, my father demanded, assuming I would leave my hard-earned position at the firm to avoid potential awkwardness. I hope you're not spreading lies about us. This situation is difficult enough, came Madeline's message, dripping with the audacity that only the truly entitled possess. David's messages were the most pathetic. I never meant to hurt you. What happened with Madeline was unexpected. I still care about you and hope we can eventually be friends. I read them all and responded to none. Instead, I channeled my energy into creating a new life framework, one in which they were peripheral characters rather than central influences. At work, I requested a meeting with the firm's managing partner, Elaine Chin, a formidable woman who had been my mentor since I joined the company. I explained the situation with stark honesty. My former fiancé is now involved with my sister, with my parents' blessing. Given that he works closely with several of our clients, I wanted you to hear it from me directly before any rumors circulate." Elaine's eyes narrowed slightly. "Will this affect your performance or create a conflict of interest?" "Absolutely not," I replied with confidence I didn't entirely feel, but was determined to manifest. "I'm committed to my career here. My personal situation has clarified my priorities, not distracted from them." She studied me for a long moment before nodding. "I've always appreciated your directness, Olivia. For what it's worth, I think you've dodged a bullet. A man who would betray you with your sister lacks the integrity we value in our partners, business or otherwise." Her words, devoid of pity and rich with practical wisdom, strengthened my resolve. I was not a victim. I was a professional navigating a challenging situation with dignity. In the evenings at Rebecca and James's apartment, I began rebuilding myself piece by piece. I journaled extensively, documenting the pattern of favoritism and emotional neglect that had characterized my family relationships. I sought out a therapist, Dr. Simmons, who specialized in family trauma and betrayal. "What you're describing is a lifetime of conditional love," Dr. Simmons observed during our second session. "Your family's support has always been contingent on your utility to them or your willingness to accept a subordinate role." "I never saw it that way," I admitted. "Few people do when they're in it." The human desire for family connection is so powerful that we often rationalize or minimize behaviors that would be unacceptable from anyone else. Those sessions became the foundation for my healing, not because they helped me forgive my family, but because they helped me forgive myself for seeking approval from people incapable of giving it authentically. Meanwhile, my family's attempts to contact me grew increasingly frantic, then hostile, then manipulative as my silence continued. They cycled through strategies with predictable desperation. First came anger. "Your behavior is embarrassing and immature," my mother texted. "People are starting to ask questions." Then threats. "If you can't handle this situation professionally, perhaps you should reconsider your position at the firm," my father wrote in a formal email, copying several board members. Followed by faux concern. "We're worried about you, Liv," Madeline messaged, using the childhood nickname she knew I despised. "Mom and Dad think you might be having some kind of breakdown." And finally, love bombing. "Despite everything, you're still our daughter and we love you," came a joint message from my parents. "Family is forever, Olivia." I saved every message but continued my silence. Each communication revealed more about their true characters than any response from me could have provoked. They were unwittingly providing me with a comprehensive record of their manipulative tactics, evidence I would later use to devastating effect. 2 months into my silent withdrawal, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. My father's assistant, Margaret, who had known me since childhood, appeared with an embossed envelope. "Your mother asked me to deliver this personally," she explained, her discomfort evident. "It's an invitation to Madeline and David's engagement party." The sheer audacity of it almost made me laugh. I accepted the envelope with a polite thank you, waiting until Margaret left before opening it. Inside was an ornate invitation to an engagement celebration at my parents' home, the very venue where my own engagement party would have taken place. A handwritten note from my mother was attached. "Your presence would mean a great deal to us all. It's time to put the past behind us and be a family again." The invitation represented everything twisted about my family dynamic, the expectation that I would prioritize their comfort over my dignity, that I would play whatever role they assigned me in their narrative regardless of the personal cost. In their world, I would attend this party, smile graciously, and demonstrate what a good sport I was, proving once again that their happiness trumped my well-being. That night, I made a decision that would alter the course of all our lives. Their betrayal had freed me from the constraints of familial obligation. I was no longer bound by the unspoken rules that had governed our relationship. I would not attend their celebration, but I would respond to their invitation in my own way, on my own timeline. I opened my laptop and began researching public records, financial disclosures, and corporate filings. If my family wanted to play games, I would show them that I had learned the rules better than they could imagine. My withdrawal wasn't an emotional reaction, it was strategic preparation for what would come next. 3 months of silence gave me the space to see my family with unprecedented clarity. From my new apartment, a minimalist one-bedroom in a high-rise downtown, as different from my parents' traditional colonial as possible, I began my investigation in earnest. My finance background proved invaluable as I meticulously pieced together the true state of the Thornton family affairs. What I discovered beneath the veneer of success and respectability was a house of cards built on questionable ethics, financial maneuvering, and carefully maintained appearances. My father's investment firm, Thornton Capital, presented itself as a paragon of fiscal responsibility and ethical wealth management. Their marketing materials emphasized family values and generational integrity, ironic, given what I now knew about their personal conduct. But as I dug deeper into their SEC filings and cross-referenced client holdings through my professional network, inconsistencies emerged. Thornton Capital had weathered the 2008 financial crisis suspiciously well. While other firms had suffered massive losses, my father's company had remained remarkably stable. At the time, he had attributed this to conservative investment strategies and foresight. Now, examining historical trading patterns and fund allocations, I identified several instances of what appeared to be advanced knowledge of market movements, subtle enough to evade regulatory scrutiny, but clear to someone who knew what to look for. My mother's design business, Eleanor Thornton Interiors, had its own secrets. Her rapid expansion 5 years earlier had coincided with a series of municipal contracts for government building renovations. The projects had been publicly questioned for their high costs, but defended as investments in quality. Through careful research of campaign finance records, I discovered substantial donations from my parents to the mayor's re-election fund just weeks before the contracts were awarded. Most revealing, however, was what I found about Madeline. My perfect sister, who had found herself through multiple career attempts, had been quietly draining family resources for years. Credit reports and property records showed she had defaulted on 2 mortgages and a business loan, all mysteriously resolved without legal consequences. Bank transfers from my parents' accounts coincided perfectly with these financial crises. And David, my ex-fiancé who had found true love with my sister, had his own motivations. His family's real estate development company had been on the verge of bankruptcy 3 years ago, around the time we'd met. Now they were thriving with a significant capital infusion that had occurred 6 months into our relationship. The source of this mysterious investment was obscured through several shell companies, but I traced it back to a subsidiary of my father's firm. The picture that emerged was clear. My relationship with David had been, at least in part, a business arrangement. When Madeline offered a more direct connection to the family wealth, no prenuptial agreement necessary, unlike what my father had insisted upon for me, David had simply traded up. I documented everything meticulously, creating backup copies stored in multiple secure locations. What had begun as a quest to understand my family's betrayal had evolved into something more significant, the uncovering of a pattern of ethical and potentially legal violations that spanned decades. Throughout this investigation, I maintained my professional performance at work. In fact, I excelled, channeling my hurt and anger into ambition. I secured 2 major clients, completed the merger project ahead of schedule, and was being considered for a senior position that would make me a direct competitor to my father's firm. My personal life, too, was evolving. Rebecca and James introduced me to their wider social circle, people who valued me for myself, not for what I could provide or how I fit into their narrative. I began tentatively dating again, not seeking a relationship but allowing myself to experience connection without the shadow of my family's approval looming over me. Dr. Simmons continued to provide valuable perspective. What you're describing, this investigation, could be seen as obsessive, she noted during one session. But I see it differently. You're reclaiming your narrative through knowledge. Just be careful that seeking justice doesn't become seeking revenge. What's the difference? I asked. Justice restores balance and provides closure. Revenge perpetuates the cycle of harm. One heals, the other wounds. Her words stayed with me as I compiled my findings. Was I seeking justice or revenge? Perhaps the line between them was thinner than I wanted to admit. The engagement party invitation remained on my desk, a reminder of the choice before me. I could expose everything now, bringing their carefully constructed world crashing down around them. Or I could wait, gathering more evidence, ensuring that when I acted, it would be irrefutable and complete. I decided on patience, a quality I had learned not from my family, but from years of navigating corporate politics. The most effective moves were those your opponents never saw coming until it was too late to counter them. By now, my family's attempts to contact me had slowed to occasional messages, performative check-ins that allowed them to tell themselves they had tried. They had interpreted my silence as defeat, assuming I was licking my wounds in isolation rather than methodically dismantling the foundation of their privileged existence. 6 months after their betrayal, I received another unexpected delivery, an official wedding invitation for Madeline and David. The ceremony would take place at the country club, with the reception at my parents' home. The event promised to be exactly what my wedding would have been, down to the color scheme Madeline had once criticized as too traditional when I had selected it. That evening, as I added the invitation to my growing file of evidence, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Need to talk. It's about your father's business. Not what you think. Coffee tomorrow. It was signed simply M. For a moment, I thought it might be Madeline attempting a new approach to draw me back into their orbit. Then I realized Margaret, my father's assistant, who had delivered the engagement party invitation months earlier. That text was the catalyst that shifted my timeline. Whatever Margaret knew could potentially complete the puzzle I had been assembling. After careful consideration, I replied with the location and time, a coffee shop far from both our workplaces, where we were unlikely to be recognized. I didn't know it then, but that meeting would provide the final piece of information I needed to enact perfect justice. As I fell asleep that night, I felt a sense of anticipation rather than dread. Soon, very soon, the family that had declared "no one wants you here" would understand exactly what they had lost when they discarded me. Hey all, I hope you're enjoying this family drama so far. If you've ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal, drop a comment below. I'd love to know what helped you get through it. This story has some major twists coming up, so make sure you're subscribed to catch the conclusion. Now, let's see what Margaret has to reveal and how Olivia's plan unfolds. Margaret was already waiting when I arrived at the coffee shop, her hands wrapped around a mug as if seeking warmth despite the mild spring day. She had aged since I'd last seen her, new lines around her eyes, hair more silver than brown now. She had been my father's executive assistant for over 20 years, the person who remembered everyone's birthdays, managed his impossible schedule, and knew more about Thornton Capital's inner workings than anyone except my father himself. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "Why the secrecy, Margaret? What's this about?" She glanced around nervously before sliding a USB drive across the table. "I've been with your father since the beginning of his firm. I've looked the other way more times than I care to admit, justified things I shouldn't have. But this crosses a line I can't ignore." "What is it?" I asked, not touching the drive. "Evidence," she replied. "Of what your father did to the Henderson account." The name sent a chill through me. James Henderson had been one of my father's oldest clients and closest friends, until his sudden death last year from a heart attack. His estate, worth well over $30 million, had been meant to establish a foundation for arts education in underserved communities. My father had been named executor, with my mother on the foundation board. The memorial service had been elaborate, with my parents front and center, promising to honor James's legacy. "What about the Henderson account?" I asked carefully. Margaret's eyes met mine, resolved but pained. There is no foundation, Olivia. The money's gone, diverted through a series of transfers and then distributed. Some went to expand your mother's business, some to cover Madeline's debts, and a significant portion. She paused, seeming to gather courage. A significant portion went to David's family's company. Right around the time he and Madeline became involved. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. My father had embezzled from his dead friend's estate, using the money to solidify the new family alignment, with David brought in through Madeline and my parents free of the financial burden of supporting their perpetually failing daughter. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Because the annual audit is coming up, Margaret explained. Your father has managed to delay it twice, but the state executor's office is getting suspicious. He's planning to create backdated documents showing that James changed his mind before his death, making the money a gift to your father's discretionary fund. He's going to forge James's signature. And you have proof of this plan? Margaret nodded toward the USB drive. Emails, draft documents, transfer records. I've been documenting everything for months. At first, I told myself it was insurance for my own protection. But after seeing how they treated you, their own daughter. She shook her head. Some lines shouldn't be crossed, not even for family. I finally picked up the drive, turning it over in my fingers. This is a serious risk for you. I'm retiring in 3 months, she replied with a grim smile. I've already secured a position with a firm in Arizona. My sister lives there. I'm looking forward to a fresh start. Why give this to me instead of going to the authorities directly? Margaret held my gaze. Because you deserve to be the one who decides what happens next. It should be your choice after everything they've taken from you. The responsibility weighed heavily. What Margaret had given me wasn't just evidence of financial impropriety, it was the power to destroy my family completely. Criminal charges, civil penalties, professional disgrace, social ostracism, all would follow if this information became public. Have you made copies? I asked practically. She nodded. Secured in my lawyer's office with instructions to release them if anything happens to me. I'm not naive about what Richard might do if he discovers my involvement. We spent the next hour going through the details of what she knew. The picture that emerged was even worse than I had imagined. My father had been engaging in various degrees of financial misconduct for years, but the Henderson situation represented a significant escalation. The pressure of maintaining appearances, funding Madeline's lifestyle, expanding my mother's business to compete with younger designers, and now incorporating David's family into their financial ecosystem, had pushed him to take risks he would have avoided in the past. As we prepared to leave, Margaret hesitated. There's one more thing you should know, she said. About your mother's design business. I raised an eyebrow, waiting. The reason it expanded so quickly 5 years ago, it's not just about the municipal contracts. She's been laundering money through it. Clients who never existed, projects that were billed at 5 times their actual cost, materials that were never purchased. For my father's clients. Margaret shook her head. For anyone who can pay. It started with a few of your father's more questionable associates, but it's grown. Your mother has a talent for making dirty money look clean through fabric swatches and contractor invoices. This final revelation completed the picture. My family wasn't just ethically compromised, they were criminals who had built their reputation and lifestyle on fraud, theft, and money laundering. The perfect Thorntons, pillars of the community, were a complete fabrication. Thank you, Margaret, I said as we parted. For everything. She touched my arm gently. You were always the best of them, Olivia. I hope you find peace, whatever you decide to do with this information. Back in my apartment, I spent the night reviewing the files Margaret had provided. They corroborated and expanded what I had already discovered, filling in crucial gaps and providing irrefutable documentation. I now possessed enough evidence to trigger investigations by the SEC, the IRS, the State Attorney General, and possibly federal prosecutors. As dawn broke, I made my decision. Justice, not revenge, would be my guiding principle. I would not destroy my family out of spite or hurt. That would make me no better than them. Instead, I would use what I knew to ensure they faced appropriate consequences while protecting innocent parties who might be collateral damage. I developed a three-phase plan, meticulous in its design and strategic in its timing. First, I would approach the Henderson family directly, sharing evidence of what had happened to James's estate and offering to help them recover the funds and establish the foundation he had intended. This would trigger a civil investigation rather than immediately escalating to criminal charges. Second, I would use my professional connections to ensure my father's clients were protected, their investments secured and transferred to reputable management before any public revelations damaged their financial security. Third, I would confront my family directly, offering them one chance to make amends, not to me personally, but to those they had harmed through their actions. If they refused, I would proceed with full disclosure to the appropriate authorities. This wasn't about making them suffer. It was about correcting the injustices they had perpetuated and ensuring they could no longer hurt others as they had hurt me. With my plan established, I felt a strange sense of calm. For months, I had been defined by what they had done to me. Now, I would be defined by how I responded, with integrity, purpose, and a clear moral compass they had never possessed. I opened my calendar and marked a date 3 weeks in the future, 1 week before Madeline and David's wedding. That would be day one of my carefully orchestrated path to justice, a date that would eventually mean more to my family than any wedding anniversary. As I prepared for work that morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw something new in my expression, not bitterness or hurt, but determination and clarity. I was Olivia Thornton, not defined by my family's rejection, but by my own strength and principles. And I was finally ready to show them exactly who that person was. The morning of my planned confrontation arrived with a crystalline clarity that seemed fitting for the occasion. I dressed with deliberate care, a tailored charcoal suit that projected authority without ostentation, pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandmother, the only family heirloom I truly valued, and subtle makeup that emphasized my composure rather than attempting to enhance my features. Over the past 3 weeks, I had executed the first 2 phases of my plan with precision. My meeting with James Henderson's daughter, Catherine, had gone exactly as I'd hoped. Initially suspicious, then shocked, and finally determined to reclaim her father's legacy, she had agreed to let me help her navigate the legal process of investigating the missing foundation funds. Her family's attorneys had already filed the initial paperwork requesting a formal audit of the estate's handling. Simultaneously, I had worked through trusted colleagues to quietly transition my father's most vulnerable clients, retirees, charitable organizations, and those with limited financial literacy, to secure management. These moves had been done discreetly, attributed to routine portfolio adjustments rather than any suggestion of impropriety. Now came the most difficult part, the direct confrontation with my family. I had chosen my timing strategically. Today was Saturday, exactly 1 week before Madeline and David's wedding. My parents would be hosting a luncheon for out-of-town relatives arriving early for the festivities. The house would be filled with extended family, witnesses whose presence would constrain my family's immediate reaction to what I was about to do. I parked my car a block away from my parents' home and walked the remaining distance, using the moment to center myself. As I approached the familiar colonial facade, memories flooded back, childhood birthday parties, holiday gatherings, the engagement dinner that had ended so disastrously. I acknowledged these memories without allowing them to weaken my resolve. The front door was unlocked, voices and laughter spilling from the back patio where I knew the luncheon would be taking place. I moved through the house quietly, noting how little had changed, the same artwork on the walls, the same furniture arranged in the same perfect configuration. My mother's design aesthetic had always prioritized timeless elegance over innovation. I stepped onto the patio, and for a moment, no one noticed me. The scene was exactly as I had expected, my parents holding court at the center of a collection of aunts, uncles, and family friends, while Madeline and David circulated among the guests, accepting congratulations with practiced modesty. Crystal glasses clinked, catering staff weaved through the crowd with trays of hors d'oeuvres, and floral arrangements in Madeline's chosen wedding colors adorned every surface. It was Aunt Patricia who spotted me first. Her eyes widened, her champagne glass freezing halfway to her lips. The recognition rippled through the gathering like a stone dropped in still water, conversations pausing, heads turning, expressions shifting from celebration to confusion. My mother saw me next, her social smile faltering momentarily before reasserting itself with increased brightness. "Olivia," she exclaimed with forced enthusiasm. "What a wonderful surprise." The room fell silent as my father and Madeline turned toward me, David half a step behind. Their expressions ranged from shock, my father, to wariness, Madeline, to outright discomfort, David. "I hope I'm not interrupting," I said, my voice steady and carrying easily across the suddenly quiet patio. "Not at all," my mother replied, moving toward me with arms outstretched as if for an embrace. "We're just celebrating with family. You should have told us you were coming. I would have set a place for you." I stepped back slightly, avoiding her touch. "I won't be staying long. I just needed to speak with you, Father, Madeline, and David. Privately, if possible." My father's business smile appeared, the one he used when navigating uncomfortable client situations. Of course. We can use my study." He turned to the guests. "Please, everyone, continue enjoying yourselves. Family business won't take but a moment." As we moved inside toward his wood-paneled sanctuary, I could feel the speculative gazes of the extended family following us. Their curiosity would ensure that whatever happened next would be thoroughly dissected in family conversations for years to come. My father closed the study door behind us, gesturing toward the seating arrangement of leather chairs that surrounded a low table. "Please sit. It's good to see you, Olivia. We've been concerned." "I'm sure you have been," I replied, remaining standing. "But my well-being isn't why I'm here today." My mother perched on the edge of a chair, smoothing her dress nervously. "Darling, if this is about the wedding." "It's not about the wedding," I interrupted. "At least, not directly." I removed a folder from my bag and placed it on the table between us. "This contains copies of documents that detail financial irregularities at Thornton Capital, particularly regarding the James Henderson estate and foundation." The color drained from my father's face. My mother's hand flew to her throat, fingers clutching at her pearl necklace. Madeline and David exchanged confused glances. "I don't know what you think you've found," my father began, his voice dropping to a dangerous register I recognized from childhood confrontations, "but I can assure you." "Save it," I said calmly. "I have emails, transfer records, draft documents showing your intent to forge James's signature. I have evidence of money laundering through Mother's design business. I have documentation of David's family's company receiving funds from the Henderson estate approximately when he began seeing Madeline." David paled. I didn't know." "Didn't you?" I asked, turning to him. "The timing seems extraordinarily convenient. Were you aware that your family's financial salvation was being purchased with my heartbreak, or was that just a bonus?" "Enough." My father slammed his hand on the desk. "Whatever you think you know, whatever you're planning, consider carefully. You're a Thornton. This would destroy all of us, including you. I stopped being a Thornton the moment you all sat at that dinner table and made it clear I was unwanted," I replied. "But destruction isn't my goal." I placed a second folder beside the first. "These are the steps I believe you should take. First, resign as executor of the Henderson estate and cooperate fully with the investigation that is already underway. Second, begin the process of legitimate dissolution of Thornton Capital, with all clients properly transitioned to reputable management. Third, discontinue the money laundering operations immediately and prepare to make restitution where possible. My mother had begun to cry silently, mascara tracking down her carefully made-up face. Madeline looked shell-shocked, while David seemed to be calculating his own exposure. "This is blackmail," my father said finally. "No," I corrected. "Blackmail would involve me demanding something for my silence. I'm not offering silence. In fact, copies of all this documentation have already been secured with multiple attorneys, with instructions for release under certain conditions." "What do you want?" Madeline asked, speaking for the first time. "Money? The wedding canceled? What will make this go away?" I looked at my sister, truly looked at her, and saw not the golden child who had been placed above me my entire life, but a frightened young woman who had never developed the strength that comes from earning your own achievements. "Nothing will make this go away," I explained. "The consequences of years of unethical and illegal actions can't simply be erased. But they can be faced with dignity, with attempts at restitution, and with acceptance of responsibility." "You would send your own parents to prison?" my mother asked, her voice breaking. "That depends entirely on your choices from this moment forward," I replied. "Full cooperation with the Henderson investigation and voluntary dissolution of the firm would likely result in civil penalties rather than criminal charges. But that window of opportunity is closing quickly." My father stood abruptly, moving to the bar cart in the corner of his study. He poured himself a generous measure of scotch, downed it in one swallow, then turned back to me. "You've been planning this for months," he stated rather than asked. I nodded. "Since the day I learned exactly what you all thought of me. And if we agree to your terms, then you'll face consequences, but they'll be consequences you can survive," I said simply. "Not because you deserve that mercy, but because I choose to show it." "The wedding," Madeline began anxiously. "Can proceed as planned, if that's what you want," I said. "Though I'd suggest considering whether a marriage built on such a foundation is likely to succeed." David looked at Madeline, then at my parents, finally turning to me. "I didn't know about the money," he said quietly. "I knew your father had helped my family's company, but I thought it was a legitimate investment." "I swear. That's between you and your conscience," I replied. "As is your relationship with my sister." My father was silent for a long moment, staring into his empty glass. Finally, he looked up at me, and for perhaps the first time in my life, I saw him without the facade of the successful patriarch. He looked older, smaller, afraid. "You've won, Olivia," he said softly. "I'll do what you ask." "This isn't about winning," I corrected. "It's about justice, for James Henderson, for your clients, and yes, for me too." My mother stood, attempting to reassert control. "The guests, what do we tell them?" "Whatever you like," I replied. "Your skill at maintaining appearances should serve you well." I gathered my bag, preparing to leave. As I reached the door, Madeline called out, "Olivia, wait." I turned back. "Why?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "Why offer us any chance at all? After what we did to you?" "Because I'm not like you," I answered simply. "And I never want to be." With those words, I walked out of the study, through the house where I had grown up seeking approval I would never receive, and into the bright sunlight of a future entirely my own. 1 year after my confrontation with my family, I sat in a quiet corner of Riverside Park, watching autumn leaves drift onto the Hudson River. The past 12 months had unfolded with the inevitability of a well-orchestrated symphony, each movement playing out exactly as I had anticipated, with a few surprising grace notes I could never have predicted. My father had followed my instructions, resigning as executor of the Henderson estate and cooperating with the investigation. The resulting legal proceedings had been kept relatively quiet, with financial settlements negotiated that would restore the foundation James had intended to establish. Criminal charges had indeed been avoided, though my father's professional reputation was in tatters. Thornton Capital had been dissolved, its legitimate clients transferred to reputable management firms. My mother's design business had undergone a restructuring, a polite fiction that allowed her to save face socially while discontinuing the money laundering operations. She had sold her commercial property and now worked from home on a much smaller scale, focusing on residential clients who valued her traditional aesthetic rather than those who needed financial services disguised as interior design. As for Madeline and David, their wedding had proceeded as planned, though with notably scaled-back grandeur. The guest list had been reduced by half, the venue changed from the country club to a local church, and the honeymoon shortened from 3 weeks in the Maldives to 1 week in the Bahamas. They now lived in a modest home in a neighboring town, where David worked for a legitimate commercial real estate firm and Madeline had, surprisingly, found purpose working with a nonprofit focused on financial literacy for young adults. The irony was not lost on me. My own life had transformed in ways I could never have imagined when I walked out of that family meeting 16 months earlier. The senior position at my firm had materialized, making me the youngest partner in the company's history. My work with Catherine Henderson to establish her father's foundation had led to a position on its board, where I helped direct arts education funding to communities that had never had such opportunities. My relationship with Rebecca and James had deepened into the kind of chosen family that provides more authentic support than blood relations ever had. Through them, I had met Michael, a pediatric surgeon whose kindness and integrity had gradually broken through the walls I had built after David's betrayal. Our relationship was progressing at its own pace, built on mutual respect rather than family expectations or social appearances. Most surprisingly, I had received a letter from Margaret 6 months after our coffee shop meeting. She had settled well in Arizona and enclosed a photo of herself with her sister, both women smiling genuinely in the desert sunshine. "You did the right thing," she had written. More importantly, you did it the right way. A text message alert drew me back to the present, a reminder of my dinner plans with Michael later that evening. As I stood to leave the park, I noticed a familiar figure walking along the riverside path. Madeline, alone, pushing a stroller with her 3-month-old daughter sleeping peacefully inside. Our eyes met across the distance, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then she changed direction, walking deliberately toward me. We hadn't spoken since the confrontation in my father's study, our communication limited to necessary legal matters conducted through attorneys. "Olivia," she said as she approached, her voice carrying that strange mix of familiarity and distance that comes with estranged family. "Madeline," I acknowledged. "How are you?" "Managing," she replied with a small, rueful smile that contained more genuine emotion than I had seen from her in years. "It's been an adjustment." I nodded, glancing at the sleeping infant. "Congratulations on your daughter." "She's beautiful." "Thank you," Madeline said softly. "We named her Grace. It seemed appropriate, given everything. The significance wasn't lost on me. Grace, the unmerited favor extended to those who haven't earned it. Listen," she continued, "I've been wanting to tell you what happened, what we all did to you." She paused, seeming to struggle with words that didn't come easily to her. "I'm sorry, Olivia. Truly sorry. Not just because of the consequences, but because it was wrong." The apology, so long in coming and now offered without expectation of forgiveness, struck me in an unexpected way. Not with the vindication I might have anticipated, but with something quieter, a release of tension I hadn't realized I was still carrying. "Thank you for saying that," I replied simply. "Mom and Dad, they're too proud to admit it, but they know it too," she added. "Dad especially. He talks about you sometimes, about how you were the only one who truly understood business, who built something on your own merit." I absorbed this information without comment, neither rejecting nor embracing it. "Would you like to meet your niece?" Madeline asked hesitantly, gesturing to the stroller. I considered the question carefully. The child was innocent of her parents' actions, of the complicated history that had preceded her birth. And perhaps there was something healing in acknowledging this new life, untainted by past betrayals. "I'd like that," I said, stepping closer to look at the sleeping infant. Grace had Madeline's delicate features, but something in her expression, even in sleep, reminded me of our grandmother, a woman of genuine strength and dignity who would have been disappointed by what her family had become. She has Grandma Eleanor's chin, I observed. You think so? Madeline looked pleased. I've been thinking that too. We stood there for a moment in the autumn sunlight, two sisters who had traveled so far from where we began, with a sleeping baby as witness to the possibility, however small, of some new understanding between us. I should go, I said eventually. I have plans this evening. Madeline nodded. Of course. It was good to see you, Olivia. As I turned to leave, she called after me softly, Are you happy? Now, I considered the question with the honesty it deserved. I'm at peace, I replied. The happiness is still growing, but it's real. She nodded, understanding the distinction. You deserved better from us. Always did. With those words hanging in the space between us, we parted, not reconciled, not family in the way we once pretended to be, but perhaps something more honest than we had ever been before. Walking back to my apartment, I reflected on the journey of the past 16 months. When my sister had said those cruel words at the family meeting, "No one wants you here," and my parents had nodded in agreement, they had unwittingly given me the greatest gift: freedom from seeking their approval, from measuring my worth by their flawed standards, from compromising my integrity to maintain a facade of family harmony. In losing what I thought was essential, their love and acceptance, I had found something far more valuable: my own strength, my own moral compass, and a life built on authenticity rather than appearances. As the autumn leaves continued to fall around me, I smiled at the perfect symmetry of it all. They had told me no one wanted me there, in their carefully constructed world of privilege and deception. They had been right. I belonged somewhere better, in a life of my own making, surrounded by people who valued truth over convenience and integrity over advantage. In the end, the most satisfying revenge wasn't destroying them or even seeing them face consequences for their actions. It was discovering that I could build a meaningful life without them, and that this life, honest and earned through my own efforts, was far richer than anything they could have offered me. Some might call it karma. Others might call it justice. I simply called it living well, the sweetest victory of all. Wow, what a journey we've been on together. I'd love to know if any part of this story resonated with you personally. Have you ever had to rebuild after betrayal or create your own definition of family? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, please give it a thumbs up so others can find it too. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about family drama, karma, and finding your own path to happiness. I'm so grateful to each of you who stayed until the end. Your support means everything. Until next time, remember that sometimes the family we choose is more powerful than the family we're born into. Red Heart.